Welcome back to another episode of the Unmeasured Podcast. I am joined today by the absolutely wonderful Naomi Powell, who has truly changed my life in so many ways. And that is true as a mentor, that is true as a friend. It will take you all 1 second of this conversation with her to understand why she is the person who I wanted to bring on for this episode to answer the question that we're going to talk through today, because she is truly someone who lives in from such an authentic, heart led place and encourages and inspires like everyone around her to do the same. And I truly can say that I do not know if I would be the woman who I am today or be where I am today if it wasn't for her presence and her guidance and her support and friendship in my life. And I'm just like thrilled, beyond to get to have this conversation with you today, Naomi, for everyone in our community to get to experience you and your light and your wisdom and just your warmth. It's such a joy. For anyone who may not know Naomi, she is the founder of The Lifestyle Edit. She is a 7-figure business mentor and the creator of Life First Business. You can learn all about the Life First Business method in an incredible training that she offers. She is truly one of a kind when it comes to the work that she does in the business space. She does such an amazing job of helping people to build sustainable businesses. And she says that she does it by helping them to do less, but better. And that is truly true. She does incredible work around money mindset, especially talking to women and some of the hurdles that we have to overcome when it comes to creating wealth. And she does it all by supporting her clients to build businesses that put their lives first. And I'm just so happy to have Naomi with us today. She's also a mother of 2 incredible little kiddos, a wife. She lives in Brooklyn, and she's had an incredible career through, like many different chapters that has led her to this place. And I just know that you're going to get a lot out of being in her presence today.
Wow, thank you so much, Sim. And I'm just so excited for this conversation because so many of the big changes that have happened in my life over the last, say, 5-ish years in business, in motherhood, in all of the different realms, you have played such an important part in all of that and seen so much of the transitions behind the scenes. So, if there was anybody that could facilitate a very real and candid conversation about this, it's you. So, I'm so excited for us to dive into all of those places today.
Absolutely. I am going to read today's question and then we can dive in. The question that we got from one of our community members is this: I'm at a point in my life where I realize I've made a lot of decisions because I felt like it was how I should live my life, especially career. I'm finally ready to start to dream about what I actually want. I want to create a life that I love. I know it won't always be easy, but I want to be intentional rather than defaulting to what I think others want me to do. This will mean a career shift, parenting differently, and definitely some boundaries. How do you know what you want and start to create it? Also, how do I find peace or feel present right here and now in my life when I feel like I have so far to go? I absolutely love this question. I love that this person said, I know it won't always be easy, but I want to be intentional. I think that's really very astute of them. And there's no one who I think is better to have this conversation about building a life that we love with than you, Naomi. So I'm so glad that you're here for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I was like frantically writing notes as you were sharing that because I think there were so many beautiful and important points. But I think the first one is like, how do you create a life and business and career by design? And I think sometimes some of the underlying assumptions is that it's a linear track. Like, okay, I decide this is the thing, and then this is always going to be the thing. And I think one of the things that you and I have really been unpacking and exploring over the last like 18 months is that it really isn't the same. And I think this is the thing that comes with age. It's like you start to meet so many different parts of you. And I think that's where some of the grief comes from, because whether that was like us in our corporate jobs where we thought that there was this very linear track, and sometimes getting there and realizing, oh my God, this is not what I want. And then in business, you spend so much time sometimes building towards something. And then there's this grief of like, oh, I've built something really special, but it no longer feels like me. So I think the thing that I've really had to ground myself into is that I'm always going to be growing. I'm always going to be evolving. What feels true for me today, I've kind of reconciled. It's going to look different in a year's time and 6 months' time. And so it's less about it being like this destination and more about how can I be present enough to be with myself, to know myself? So it's less about moving towards this destination and like getting into this habit of being like, what feels like me? What feels authentic to me? And creating a space to have that intimate relationship with yourself. So as and when life is giving you opportunities, decisions, those sliding doors moments, you can really trust that you're going to make the decision that is in the highest alignment of where you are in that moment.
I love that you said that, especially because I think it takes it's an unnecessary pressure, but it takes the pressure off to make a decision today that's going to be the right decision for you 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It can be the right decision now, and it can take you to a place where you learn more about yourself, and then you might make a different decision. And I think you and I have both had so many different seasons, chapters, whatever we want to call them in life, where we really have started those chapters from a place of knowing like, yeah, this is something that I really want to do, or this feels really right, or this has been a very intentional decision. And then we evolve or we change or life around us changes. And so we, change to like meet the demands or the priorities or whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden that decision from 3 years ago is like, all right, I'm ready to make like a different decision now. And so to take the pressure off of it needing to be the right thing forever and ever, this like ultimate destination, I think is so important. I also think what's really beautiful about this question is that this person is like giving themselves permission to want something and not just to operate in response to like expectations from people around her, but that she's saying, like, yeah, actually, maybe for the first time ever, I'm giving myself permission to want what I want or to actually like explore what I want. And I know for me, that permission at every single moment of change has been so important. It's almost like I've had to re-give myself that permission because my experience has been personally that the further along in life that I get, the more responsibilities that I feel like I'm holding. And all of a sudden, decisions feel like, whoa, these decisions feel like they have bigger consequences, or these decisions feel like they impact more people, or these decisions feel like it's not just something that's going to shift something for me, but it's going to shift something like for my family or for everyone around me. Even something as small as like, I'm going to start to put in place a boundary that can feel hard because it can shift the energy in a relationship. Or, oh, I want to parent slightly differently. Well, I know for me that's been challenging because it's like, well, let's open up and dig deep into all of the things that are like triggering to you and all of the stuff like deep within, like something can feel good and right. And also it can carry with it like a lot of challenging, deeper, hard stuff that has to be processed along the way.
Yes. And I remember when I got back from London, I sent you a podcast of like voice notes because you were like, tell me all about it. And I was like, do you really want to know? Here
I
you go,
loved those. I
an
loved
hour
those voice
later.
notes.
But I have been in so much grief around this because I think there's a quote that really stood with me, and it was by, she's a therapist, and she has this book, like The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control. And she was interviewed, and the person was asking, like, what are some of the women that you admire? And she said, I admire any woman who asks themselves what they want and take the answer seriously. And it was like, whoa,
That makes me
because
want to cry.
that's the thing. There are so many of us who have become so unattuned with what we want because of outside of conditioning. But there's also a stage in the journey where you start to get these intuitive nudges and these like divine inclinations. But we also sometimes in those moments cannot even allow ourselves to listen to where we are being led, because we are so afraid that if I actually start to be clear on what I want, that means change. That may mean that certain things or people in my life, like things have to change. And I think there's something really confronting about that. And I think that, if you think of like ignorance is bliss, it's one thing when you don't know, but it can sometimes feel even more painful when you know what you want, because it's like, okay, now you take your power back. Like, are you going to act on that or not? And, I think also we have to have compassion for ourselves. It's really easy to reflect back on past decisions that we've made through the lens of the person we are today and the information that we have today. So even for me going back home to London, I remember even saying to you that I almost wanted to like just hug that former version of myself. Not even like the baby version of me, but even the Naomi in her 20s, who now, as someone in their mid 30s, can look back. So much of it wasn't my authentic self. I didn't know me then. And I'm just like, there was a time where I was so frustrated with some of these decisions that I made, um, just following what everybody else was telling me. But now, through the lens of hindsight, like I can see why I made those decisions. And I've really had to reconcile that I didn't have any expanders in my life growing up of people who actually made a life on their own terms. They were not defaulting to the roles that they play in everybody else's lives. So even when it came to parenting, I just noticed myself like becoming my mom and like defaulting into some of the things that she did with like martyrdom and not asking for help and taking on so much stuff. So for me, at least, sometimes I've had to be completely rock bottomed and feel the pain of the inauthenticity in some of those decisions to really come back home to myself.
You mentioned growing up, like not having many of these expanders. And I think that expansion can be so valuable when you're like, okay, I'm in this moment where I've decided that I am no longer going to just default into doing what I should or what people expect of me. And I want to start building a life that I love, right? Like, I feel like that's kind of the moment in time that this person who sent in this question is in. And I do think one thing that can be really valuable in those moments is asking like who feels expansive to you, looking around, seeing if you can find women or people who something about what they're doing you just feel so drawn to. And Naomi, this is true. You are a forever you are forever expansive to me. And I'm going to ask you to tell a story in a second here because I think it's going to be expansive to everyone listening. But the first time we met on your podcast and we talked on your podcast. And I remember for everyone listening, Naomi interviewed me on her podcast and I was like, we stopped recording and I asked her, I'm like, when can I work with you? Like, I need you to send me information about when I can work with you because being in her energy, I just knew I'm like, there's something here and I want to be in this. I want to be close to this. You are being around you is making me feel a certain way. And I love feeling this way. It's like a little exciting and like a little scary because it feels different and like it might push me in a good way to growth. But like, I want more of this. And I think we meet those people or we see those people. It might even be someone you never come in contact with. It could be someone that you just notice the way they're carrying themselves, like in a coffee shop, whatever. It can be tiny or big, but like, what is it about this person that is making you feel a certain way? Is it that they seem confident? Is it that they seem self-assured? Is it that they're, doing something that you want to be doing? And like, really be curious with that. And I feel like that can help you to see more of what you want. Cause I think sometimes we're like, okay, I want to do what I want. Wait, what do I want? And I do feel like people who we come in contact with who like create certain feelings for us. It's like, wow, I want a little bit of what they have. Like, I want more of that. What is it about them that's creating that feeling for you? And I think that can be a really amazing guide in the beginning. Naomi, I would love for you to share a little bit about your summer and what you did this summer and how you made this happen, because it was it was incredible to watch. I think it was such a beautiful example of you, making your dreams come true, living a very intentional life, and not making your dreams come true like everything's rainbows and butterflies, but really saying, like, I want to live an intentional life, and I'm going to move the pieces and put the pieces together in a way that facilitates me at the end of the day to feel so fulfilled and like I am living a life of meaning. And it was incredible to see as your friend. It was incredibly expansive, and I think I just think it's such a great story. So I'd love if you'd be willing to share a little bit about your summer abroad.
Yes. So, just for context, as Simi said, I live in Brooklyn, New York, with my New Yorker husband and our kiddos, but I am originally from London. So, I went back to London. We had my son's fourth birthday there. My husband and I did our first trip. We went to Paris for a couple of days. It was our first trip post baby. So, it was a really big thing. But I'm pleased that Simi brought this up because, yes, my whole business is life first business, but I want you to know that as amazing as the summer was, and I'm going to share a bit more about that, it came off the back of a lot of grief. And it even makes me really weepy to think about it because, especially through therapy, I had realized that being a highly capable person had become the thing that had hurt me more than anything else. And the worst thing of that being like my core, like trauma response, is that nobody sees when you're struggling because you're highly capable. So I'm in a profession where I hold other people for a living, but I'm also the person in my family, in my friendship groups that everybody goes to. And I was beginning to drown in it. So that was one of the things that was happening on the sidelines, where I just kept saying to my therapist, like, I've rejigged so much in my business, but I'm still chronically tired. Friends will text me, and I'm that person that won't text for weeks because it's like I want to, but I get so exhausted. I just don't have anything more to give. Plus, I had a 3 year old and a 1 year old at the time away from family. I just felt so depleted. And I was also coming to a stage, and again, by asking myself this question of what I really want, where I realized that so much of the activities in my career, in my business, was driven from this trauma response of safety. I came from an incredible upbringing and had the most phenomenal mum who was like two parents plus some, phenomenal. But I also came into a dynamic that was very chaotic, that, had multiple situations where the rug could be pulled underneath me. So what I didn't realize is that I worked really hard, again, very capable, but it was very much driven from this, I need to be safe. I need to be safe. Even when my business was like in a really great place, it was still like, I need more. I need to have emergency fund. I need an emergency fund for the emergency fund because I was so afraid of feeling that way. And I got to the point, I was just tired. I was so tired, and had realized that, yes, I was doing all of the things and achieving all of the things. It wasn't actually making me happy. And for the first time, I had to just ask myself, take all those things away. What actually makes you happy? What are the moments where you just feel alive? And just before I went to London, my sister-in-law passed away at the age of 37. And it was just, of course, it was awful and so sad and so tragic, but it just struck me so much because I'm just like, how can someone just be alive one day and then at 37 their life is gone? And I think it all just happened at a time where I was just reevaluating my life, and I'm just like, yeah, what actually matters? And it was like, I love my work, but I'm also in a season of my life where my joy and my self concept and my identity cannot come from work. There was a time where I loved work life integration and the fact that my business afforded me the ability to be like boxering while I'm like breastfeeding and like navigating that season of my life. But there was a moment where everything shifted, and I'm like, I want boundaries. I want to be either in my work and doing my work, or I want to be in my life. I don't want to constantly be thinking about, I have to scale the business to the next level and what's next and what is there to fix and how am I expanding and growing myself. It's like that will just come. I want to just be deeply where I am. And it was one of those things, I remember saying this to you, where things can feel so true and aligned, but there can also be a grief that comes with that. And I had to make a lot of decisions, things that I'd loved, like one-on-one coaching, masterminds. I was just like, I want to reclaim that energy back for my life. And I had to also kind of go off the radar and just like unfollow everybody, be in my own energy, because I realized that I want a big life, but I don't want the life that a lot that we see the common narrative of. Like, I would much rather spend time with my friends and my family than going to conferences and speaking and being on flights all the time and doing all of this kind of stuff. And like, and it's not that there's anything wrong with that, but I realized that it can almost replicate that career ladder dynamic in your own business where it's just like more, 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 more. So it just, that clarity, I needed to kind of hit that moment to be like, yeah, things have really got to shift. So I started making a lot of those changes and had to trust myself and also move away from this like, you're doing everything on your own, you have to be this highly capable person. And I really lent into the people in my life, right? And you know, my friends, family, and I realized just how supported I was, and I needed that as I made really scary shifts. And I think this is the beauty also of getting older, that I could draw on so many times in my life where I did the quote unquote thing that didn't make sense, that nobody else understood, and was the pathway for me, getting to where I was destined to be. um so those changes allowed me to shift my business model. So we took 2 months off over the summer, and it was just so wonderful. It was so wonderful. We kicked it off with a couple of days in Paris with my husband, and it just was like, it reminded me of, it was like a remembering of, those parts of me that I think just over time I had forgotten. And, we would be just like hanging out in the backyard, gardening, having coffee with my mom and my sisters. And I was just like, it was just a feeling of satiation that I hadn't experienced in a really, really long time. Um, yeah, sorry, I feel like I've been talking so much.
I
But
This is so
yeah, there's a
beautiful,
lot in
and
it.
thank you. Obviously, I was moved to tears multiple times during when you were sharing that. I think what's really beautiful that I'm, like reflecting on from what you just shared is that we talked really early on in this conversation about how sometimes you make a decision or you build something and it it feels right at the right time, right? Like you were talking about like nursing and voxering, and like that was a season in your life. And at the time, that felt aligned and that felt right until it didn't. And then you were willing to sit with that feeling of like something is not right here and this is really scary, and I'm going to go deep and I'm going to dig deep and understand like what is truly motivating me here. And then I'm going to be willing to make shifts if what's motivating me isn't what I want to let motivate me in my life. And when you were talking about, the trip with Michael to Paris, and then also like, sitting in the garden with your mom drinking coffee and it feeling so satisfying and satiating, I was just thinking about how I think that that is a feeling, that real deep satisfaction that can only come when we make decisions that are from a place of like, I'm making this decision not from a place of trying to like keep myself safe or prove that I'm enough or prove my worth, but I'm making this decision from a place of like really knowing who I am and not needing like to prove anything. And then like that's when we get to feel that like deep satisfaction, where I feel like when we make decisions from a place of more of like you were describing, this sort of like, almost like trauma response where and I have my own, where I'm like, oh, I can feel when I'm acting from that place. It doesn't matter what happens. It never feels enough for long, because that hole inside like just opens right back up. And it's like, I'm trying to fill it. I'm trying to find a way to like make this feeling okay. And it will feel okay for a quick moment. And then it's like the gaping void inside just sucks that up. And it's like, wow, it's wide open. And I've got to try to fill it again. And I just thought that vision of you sitting there in total ease, not needing to like prove anything and feeling that deep satisfaction is like one of the most beautiful visuals, and like just so amazing that you were able to get to that place and to do the really hard, scary work. And you mentioned trusting yourself, and like, I just I needed to trust myself. What are the things that you feel like in your life that you do or don't do that help you to trust yourself? Like, what for you helps you to build that sense of like self trust?
For me, self-trust, it comes with action. And that's why I was saying that's what I love so much about getting older, is that I can draw on so many times where I have listened to that part of me and followed it. And that doesn't mean that it's been easy, right? Oftentimes, when we are moving towards what is true for us, it requires a shedding. So it's not that it's like, oh, I decided and everything was easy, but there was no longer this internal battle. I could actually use all of my creative thinking towards, okay, what needs to happen in order for me to realign to this North Star. So it's definitely been that trust muscle. So it's like I say to my clients, who have, of course, they're trying to work on their businesses. I ask them like, where have you called big manifestations into your life in other areas? So oftentimes it will be like in a relationship, in a cross country move, in their health journey, in all of these different areas. I'm like, the energetics are the same. What was it that allowed you to call that into your life in this area? How can we apply that over here? And I realized that, yeah, there were so many other areas where I had no resistance. And that's why, we can have people who, manifest things really fast or take time, and they may have come even from the same family. But it's because we have different conditioning. I always think of it as like, when you move into an apartment and it's got like paint and then wallpaper and this, right? We all have different layers. So we get to chip at that, get to chip at all of that. The more we're willing to lean into those moments, because that's how we proactively build that trust muscle. And I think for me, I had to also, part of my work was yes, that trust muscle, but also not coming at it from a place of like, this is something that I, Naomi one, have to transcend. And that self-reliance from this muscle of self-trust. And actually be like, how can I create more intimacy and connection with the people who love me by allowing them to love me as I'm navigating all of this? I don't need them to solve my problems. I don't need them to give me the answers or figure it out, but allowing myself to be deeply held when I would default into just navigating everything on my own.
And to think about how you felt when you were holding everyone and everything. And it's like, okay, yeah, I have to do this on my own to be able to say, I'm going to let people hold me too. We're going to hold each other. Like that is such a profound shift. And it requires a lot of vulnerability to say, like, I'm going to let someone like really see me and I'm going to let them hold me in this. And I'm so curious if this happens to you, this happens to me. And I wonder if it happens to you too. I think when you're someone who does a lot of like the emotional holding in life and in work, and it can feel sometimes like, okay, yeah, my value in relationships comes from my ability to do this. This is the value that I bring to this situation. I'm here to hold all the feelings and I'm always you have a problem, call me. I'm here to help. You know, like it's just this is who I am to many people and how I show up in many relationships. And then to think about, okay, wow, I'm really like emotionally fatigued to a point where like it's overwhelming for me to even look at my text messages because I just know that I don't have the emotional energy. Like I was like teary when you were saying that. I'm like so relatable. As you know, I have been there as well. I have had moments of time where I have felt that too. And I think what's really has been really scary for me is to say I'm going to let this other person hold a little bit of like my emotional experience, or I'm going to let them, you know, like play a little bit of this part. And on the surface, it's like, yeah, totally. Like that's like a great thing in a relationship where you're holding each other and it's, you know, for lack of a better term, like give and take. But I think when that's been your identity in relationships and when that feels like that's the value that you're bringing to the relationship, it has felt very scary for me to dial that down a little bit because the fear part of me says, um, if you're giving less of that, you become less valuable in this relationship. If you're not as helpful in this relationship, you're less valuable in this relationship and you'll become a burden and then people won't want you around. This is my like rejection wound, right? That's what I'm like always working with. I'm always like, okay, like just, you know, wanting to feel like I'm not annoying or a burden or whatever it might be, like that, how you described safety for me, like I come back to that over and over again. And, you know, thank God for therapy. But that has been so challenging for me and something that I've had to do a lot of work around because when something feels like that is why people keep me around and now I'm going to change this, like why would people want to keep me around? And I wonder if at any point you had feelings like that.
100%. And I had it in both business and in life. So I am known for being a space holder, holding really safe, intimate containers. And that was my biggest fear. And I remember even like sending you like a long boxer about it. And I was so triggered by it because I was like, I love holding those spaces and I love being that person to my private clients, to my mastermind clients. But there gets to a point in relationships where certain dynamics, I was just like, this is actually hurting me to continue to operate like this. So I am willing to let everything go. I am willing for relationships, friendships also to let go because I'm no longer willing to participate in this dynamic. I am no longer willing to not have needs. And so there were certain relationships where I was so wildly triggered because the moment I needed to be held, they couldn't hold me. And I'm not expecting, I do this for a living. So I'm not expecting someone to hold me like a coach or a therapist, right? It's my responsibility to resource myself to that extent. But to have friendships and relationships where that can't sustain me having needs, that was actually a contract, like a spiritual contract that had expired. And that was okay. But I needed to raise my self worth to be like, no, I need to be seen and heard in my relationships. And by me really rising in that self worth, naturally things get to go. And it gets to, again, be the right decision. And it gets to be things that we grieve about. Like I definitely put my walls up in friendships because I was like, see, the one time that I needed to be held, I, you know, I wasn't, and I was so deeply hurt and felt very betrayed by that. So I put my walls up. And that's why, again, a lot of people look at me and it could feel like a hard exterior to come through because they see someone who's wildly capable and also someone um, who doesn't really share because I've just learned to be really self-reliant. So I just got to a point where I just couldn't have relationships any other way. Like it had to change. And I think I take a lot of responsibility on that. Like I had to do the work. My therapist says, like, intimacy is into you, I see. How can you have intimate relationships if you don't allow yourself to be seen? So I really had to be proactive with that. And it's definitely been a process.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love how you shared about raising your self-worth and being willing to let go of relationships that like weren't able to meet you there. I think that this is this is like the stuff of creating a life that you love, where it's not just like, oh, let me paint like a perfect picture and step into it. It's like this is I think, the reality of creating a life where you're like, wow, I have really strong, like intimate relationships that can hold me in in these things. I know during COVID, for me, I had, because you were, walking with me through this, I had this like breakthrough moment where I was like, wow, I am doing 100% in so many relationships. And this is when I had my burnout, like just, I can't, emotional burnout, I guess we can call it. It was like similar ages with my kids, like holding, like lots of space in coaching, lots of space in relationships. And I was like, I just can't be the one who's always reaching out, who's always checking in, who's always, you know, it was a little different in COVID because it's not like we were making plans, but the one who's always like inviting and doing this and doing that. And I was just like, I'm not doing it anymore. And I basically just like stopped. And I'm like, the friendships where people want to be in a relationship with me, like they will reach out and I just need to take this break. And as I'm sure people can imagine, many of my friendships essentially like stopped there, not that I have any ill will towards people. I would love to see them at an event or say hi or whatever it might be. But like, those are not people who I'm like regularly interacting with. My friends now, the circle is smaller, but it's deeper and it's richer. And I feel like there truly is intimacy in these close relationships. But that was so effing hard and uncomfortable. I would sit there. I would sit there and my thought process is like, okay, I haven't heard from this person in a while. I wonder if they're upset with me. I should reach out to them and check in. And then I'd be like, no. And I would have to sit there with my phone and just be like, I'm not reaching out to check in. Like it was, I mean, it is wild. to say this out loud. It would be like sitting there just like sweating, shaking, like trying to keep myself from reaching out. But I was like, I am breaking these cycles. Like I cannot live my life like this anymore. This is wild.
And think
And
of the energy. Think of
yes,
how much energy. You're already
yes.
exhausted and don't want to respond to the text.
Oh my God.
Like, it's energy.
It's so much energy. And my mantra, affirmation, whatever we want to call it for myself, like similar to you talking about raising your self worth, like I would literally sit there and breathe and just say to myself over and over again, I can handle this discomfort. I can handle this discomfort. I can handle this discomfort. And you know what? I handled that discomfort. Everything, it was so uncomfortable, like to the point where sometimes I'd be like, I feel like my skin's going to explode right now because these habits, I mean, these are decades long habits, but I'm just like, this is not how I want to be in my relationships. This is not at my core. This is not who I am. This is like a panic, response that I have. And it's not how I want to build my relationships. And like just reminding myself I can handle this discomfort. Like I probably had to say it 1,000 times, but I did it. And now, like, I don't have relationships like that anymore. And it's been so incredible. And now when I think about texting someone, I have a filter that I run it through. It happens so much less, but my filter is like, are you texting them because you really want to connect with them? Or are you texting them because like you have some anxiety in this relationship? And if it's like you have some anxiety in this relationship, I put my phone down and I take a deep breath and I'm like, I can handle this discomfort. And if it's because I really want to reach out, I reach out because I love connection and connection is one of my core values in life. It's like one of the things that I feel like I'm is part of like what I'm here for. And I want to cultivate that in like really real and authentic ways. And that is part of my dream life, like having real, true, deep connections. But that also means I have to let go of the other stuff, or else I'm not going to be able to experience that.
Yes. Oh, there was so much greatness in what you said. And you were a massive expander to me. 'Cause I remember you saying, and I'm going to butcher this, but basically, like, I am no longer available to be in relationships where I don't know where I stand with you, And I think that's the difference is I think also as we get older, what I'm loving about our friendships is that like even with you and I, like sometimes I will like go MIA for a while, then I'll come back and I'll be like, Sam, I'm so sorry, I've been really MIA. And you're like, really? I know you've got so much going on. I never ever question our relationship. If I haven't heard from you in a while, I know that this is probably a busy season. And once things calm down, it'll be like there's no time has passed. And I think, you know what I mean? It's really important to be able to tap into the difference. And I think what has been so beautiful when we raise our, I think it's like we almost need to do the work to raise our self-worth and decide like what the standard is in our lives and in our relationships and also what we want. And then to your point, then it's a beautiful thing because you put a stake in the ground for what you want and you start to notice all of the old dynamics that has made what you're saying that you want elude you. And that becomes our work to really sit with. And even just on this topic of like life by design, I was rereading The Artist's Way over the summer. And one of the exercises that she recommends that I love is she's like, write down, you know how we often say, like, if I had another life, I'd do this and I'd do that and I'd do that. She's like, write down 5 different lives, like 5 different lives. And like, what would you be doing? What would your career be? Like, what would your average day look like and journal on it? And she's like, you get to live that in this one life. Like, how can you incorporate different elements from this different life and incorporate that into your life? Like, we feel like everything is stuck. Like, I'm on this track and I have to stick with it. And it's really challenged me to like think outside of the box. And just even going back to the London thing, when I left for London, I very much thought that, oh my God, I'm going to go home. And then I'm going to say to Michael, like, we have to move home. Like, I need to go home. But I actually came back And again, there was another sense of grief because I was just like the London part of my life is complete for the moment. And I remember like I was like in tears telling you about this because it was just like I noticed that I kept saying, if I could just move my mum to Brooklyn and be here, like I'd be happy. And I was like, so there's nothing actually about London that feels authentic to you anymore. Because it's like the only person that you want is if you wish that you could have your mum here. And and I kept saying like, oh, if I lived in another, in another life, it would be like this, another life, it would be like this. But I hadn't really recognized that I've grown so much. And when I went back to London, it didn't feel like I was going home. It was like, oh, I'm visiting and it's really great to catch up. And there were so many people that I caught up with, and it was so wonderful to catch up with them. But I also realized that it was wonderful because it was novel. And that sounds so bad. But even my therapist says, like, you have to ask yourself, like, what are the conditions that this relationship needs to thrive? And I realized that with some of those relationships, even being home, it was nice because it was novel. I love the life that we've created here in Brooklyn. I love every single part of it. Even when I came home, I was like, oh, even drop off, like I'm bumping into my neighbors, my coffee shop knows my own, like everything about my life is like, I love. And I don't think I'd realized that I was actually living the manifestation of what, for so long, because I was so clinging on to what I thought my life should have looked like or where I thought I should be. So I really challenge you to be like, just ask yourself, where are you settling for good when great was always on the table? Where are you like, oh, but I've always lived here, or I've always done this, and I've always, what's the, like, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live? If you could do anything, like, what could you do? And even I love seeing the conversation that we're even having about, to start choosing not to have kids. I think so many people just had kids because it was like, as women, we just have kids. I love the conversation and this new dialogue that we're having about women who are like, actually, with the vision that I have for my life, I don't see kids being part of that. Um, and I've read a lot of articles of women that are in their, 40s and 50s who love their children, but like if this conversation had happened then, my life may look fundamentally different. And I think it's having the audacity to ask ourselves those questions.
I agree. I think that it's so amazing that our eyes and hearts are being opened up to like many different possibilities. Um, I also really appreciate what you shared about what are the conditions that this relationship needs to thrive. And I'm even thinking about that in terms of like our relationship with ourselves, because I think when we're thinking like, okay, I want to have the audacity to ask myself like what I want and to see that like that's possible to take that seriously. I think we've got to have conditions in place that help to support our relationship with ourselves. What are some of the conditions right now in this moment in time? Knowing that, of course, things change, like what we need at different times change. But what do you feel like are the things where, when you think about them, when you think about certain conditions, you're like, this is really like supporting me right now in this moment. This is what I need in my relationship with myself right now to feel like I can do the things that we're talking about, right? Like even the hard stuff of like handling discomfort and things like that.
Yeah, so Lacey Phillips from To Be Magnetic has a really beautiful framework called Your Authentic Code. And it's basically like deciding like 4 or 5 things that go to the heart of what makes you you. And so some of mine are being seen. And I was really shadowy around that for a while. It's like, is that egotistical? But it's like, I truly believe that I have gone through some of the things that I've gone through on purpose. So I could be a conduit for this work that I do with women and leading them. So part of being seen is being given platforms like this to be able to talk about this work and really support people around it. So being seen is a big one for me. Family is a really big one, especially for me right now with 2 very young kids. I have two sisters, 12 and 15 years older than me. So I saw them with their kids, and I just realized that just learning from some of their mistakes, like the time goes so fast. Nothing, no opportunity will ever be more important than me being present for my kids in this season of life, because I know how fast it is. So family is another one. Self-care and spiritual time, like, and that is like alone time, me connecting to source, divinity, me having time to like hear myself think, that connection with myself outside of being a wife, a mother, all of that. It's like me. um Luxury, financial independence. So luxury in terms of like experiences, travel, trips, all of that kind of stuff. And financial security, where I feel like I can make financial decisions in the truest alignment of me and not having money make my decisions for me. So those are my authentic code. So you can see, once you get clear on what those are for you, that becomes your North Star. So even with the changes that I've made in my business, it was like, oh no, this is creating more time, that's actually taking away from family and taking away from solo time. What does my business model need to look like to honor this kind of North Star? What seat do I want to occupy in my business? If I'm saying being seen, that's actually more in visionary mode. So I don't actually want to be in the execution role. I want to be able to be talking about the work because I've already created a body of work. So you can see that the more that you're really crystal clear on that, as and when life is presenting you with different opportunities, you always get to put it through those things.
Those are such beautiful components of your authentic code. And I love hearing about those. And Naomi, I love you. You're so fantastic. I'm so thankful that we got to have this conversation today. And I'm so thankful that we got the chance to really see you today and that you got to be seen here. So thank you so much for being with me today.
My pleasure, Sim. Thank you.